Greenway, who can play on he's your most important penalty killer when he's healthy. He's provides some physicality and some tenacity and some veteran leadership, so you definitely need to do that. The Zucker deal, I was extremely happy with. I kind of have been saying it all year, re-sign him. I know I flip-flopped a little bit once Greenway was back, thinking maybe he was a little bit more important, but to get Zucker on a 2-year deal as well, and also not have to give him a raise, to actually pay him, only $250,000 less per year, but that's not insignificant. So I like that. Zucker kind of brings everything that they need. He's their most effective power play forward on the roster heading into today. We'll see what happens with Norris going forward, obviously, when we talk about that later, but he's been their most effective power play forward, a veteran leader who has shown a desire to be here. He has been a nice change in terms of just the quotes that he has given. It's not the same old stuff that you're hearing from every other Sabre. He seems to be a guy that gets it. And like I said, just the flexibility that he brings to your lineup makes a lot of sense to try and retain him there. 2 years is not bad at all, right? I know he's a little bit on the older side, and you're probably banking on this being maybe a bit of an outlier year for him. But at the end of the day, 2 years, 4.75 per year. If he gives you 15 goals a year for the next 2 years, you don't care, especially because he does have that role on the power play, which will, the way his skill set is, I don't think that's going away anytime soon. So the rental market was a little bit crazy. When I woke up this morning and he wasn't signed yet, I was kind of like, man, the rental market's pretty nuts. I wouldn't mind seeing what you could get for him. But the second the extension was announced, it felt like that was a smart move for Kevyn Adams.
Yeah, I'll take a look at the updated cap here for everybody on Puckpedia. Almost called it cap friendly, but no, it's Puckpedia now. Jason Zucker gets the 4.75 for 2 more years, so he actually took a little bit of a cut from what he got this year at the $5 million, and then you've got Greenway at $4 million for the next 2 years. So both those guys will become unrestricted free agents at the same time. Zucker obviously 5 years older than Greenway is, but you mentioned Zucker's production. I mean, he still leads the team in power play goals, which was something that we talked about. It was a pleasant surprise, but it wasn't necessarily a good thing that a 32-year-old, 33-year-old was leading your team in power play goals, but he has been productive up there, playing on that left wing, playing on the top power play, being that net front presence that they kind of need there, and he's been one of their more productive forwards. They said he's had some sort of an injury the last few games. I was wondering if that may have been a little bit trade-related or not, but regardless, it's nice that somebody that has traveled a lot and maybe somebody that has been moved at the deadline quite a bit in Jason Zucker wanted to remain in Buffalo. And I think I saw some people on X saying like he should earn a letter now that he's going to be here for a couple seasons. I would tend to agree. I think Zucker has brought a lot of presence to that room, given his experience in the league.
Yeah, especially given the subtraction that you saw today. I think you should slap a letter on. I mean, I don't know what his injury status is. Like you said, if he's back, I imagine it's not that serious. It doesn't seem like it was going to be that big of a deal, but I'd slap a letter on his chest for the rest of the year and then see what happens going forward. He's clearly a veteran leader on this team that, they trust. And, if you listen to Adams' availability today, he did mention that Zucker is a guy that people have leaned on, including your captain, Rasmus Dahlin. So that kind of speaks volumes to the type of leadership that he brings. I think it's a no-brainer to slap a letter on that guy's chest and for at least the rest of this year, and honestly for 2 more years, why not?
And we got our Twitter poll here for Jason Zucker. Let me find that one there. Of course, it's the last one. Thoughts on Buffalo Sabres extending Jason Zucker to a 2-year contract at 4.75 per. Solid re-sign and terms. Should have moved him or indifferent. And solid re-sign and terms. One with landslide, 75.9%. So it sounds like the fans out there were in agreement that this was a good move for Kevyn Adams to be able to get done today.
Yeah, honestly, it does feel like, for the most part, like maybe not an overwhelming, but definitely a big majority of Sabres fans were relatively happy with both of the re-signings. And I get it. Like I said, it's 2 veteran forwards who have actually been productive in their roles. Very different, right? Zucker's got the production. Greenway doesn't have the production, but he's been effective in the role that he's brought. And just like, I know the Montreal game, the first Montreal game was a disaster, but like the way that he was, getting chippy, getting in there, like that's one thing that the Sabres do kind of need from their forwards, especially if they can be productive in other ways. So like a guy like Greenway makes sense. So feels like those 2 re-signings made a lot of sense. Obviously we'll get into it later, but I was always for bringing both players back as long as there was a significant move elsewhere. that did happen, which we'll talk about later. So I agree. I think Zucker and Greenway bringing them back. Smart by Kevin Adams.
I didn't put out a poll for Greenway, but I assume that
it feels like most people were
Yeah.
pretty happy that he was back as well.
Yeah, I think they both bring something to the team that if they were to move them, they'd be looking to bring back that type of asset in either now or in the summertime. So they get Zucker and Greenway done there with the 2 re-signs. We'll start off with their first unrestricted free agent. It was actually the Sabres' last deal that took forever in the queue when the trade deadline actually hit at 3 p.m. I believe it was like 2 hours of me refreshing Twitter about 100 times to find out what the return was for Henri Jokiharju. The longer it got, the bigger I thought it was going to be, and then, leveled my head a little bit. But he does go to the Boston Bruins, Austin, for a 4th-round pick in 26, which I believe is not even Boston's. I think it's Edmonton's.
Yes.
But it's not Boston's 4th-round pick. But he does go to Boston after a bunch of moves they made today, a lot of seller trades, but they needed some bodies there, and maybe Jokiharju finishes out the year there, and they're able to bring him back for a couple-year contract. But they do move Jokiharju there right at the last minute, and they get a 4th-round pick, Austin. I think that's a tidy piece of business there.
Oh, 100%. Like I said, not 100% sure. Like you said, probably just for a body. They lost Carlo. They bring in a right shot defenseman in Jokiharju for the rest of the year, see what happens, I guess. Doesn't really make a whole ton of sense from Boston's standpoint, but at the end of the day, giving up a 4th-round pick is basically nothing, so whatever. But on the Sabres side, a guy you had to move a pending UFA who just, say what you want about Jokiharju. The Nylander for Jokiharju swap back in the day by Botterill. Tidy piece of business there. Clearly, that was a trade that Botterill came out on top of. Jokiharju's been a serviceable player for the most part. Downhill a little bit, inconsistent a little bit, but he's been an NHL defenseman for the Sabres since that trade has kind of been whatever. So I think getting a 4th-round pick, was it 2025 or 26?
It was 26, I believe.
26 4th-round pick. Okay, so either way, right? Not the end of the world, but getting a 4th-round pick for a guy who wasn't going to be here anyway and, hadn't really been in the lineup all year. Tidy piece of business. Like I said, that's one of the ones that I think we were all expecting to move, especially once both guys were re-signed. It was like, okay, well, Jokiharju's the only pending UFA, so he's clearly gone. And he's been held out the last couple of games anyway, so it kind of just makes sense. Didn't see Boston. That was not on the radar for me at all for the team that was going to acquire him. But, you got an asset for a defenseman. Good job, I guess.
Doesn't really tie into the Sabres, but do you have any thoughts on, former Sabre becoming a Bruin, Casey Middlestat?
Again, we'll see what happens with Bowen Byram in the future, but I don't want to be giving Kevin Adams too much credit, but he kind of got a win on the Middlestat Byram trade, right? Byram has been serviceable with Dahlin. Middlestat started out well with Colorado and then signed an extension, and then not even a year into that extension is shipped off to Boston, who, I mean, that's a topic for a different day, but we should probably do a nice little deep dive into the Boston Bruins, considering how much we dislike them as Sabres fans, because their little downfall today and over the last little bit has been fun to see. But Middlestat will have, given the fact that they traded Coyle, they have an opening in the top 6 for a center for them. So, and he'll have an opportunity there. We'll see what happens, but got to give Kevin Adams some credit on that. Middlestat, not exactly the dominant, center that we thought he was going to be. So good, all the best to him. It's going to be funny now that our former, I don't know if Middlestat was ever a 2C here, but Cousins and Middlestat are both our former 2Cs are now are back in the division. So that's kind of funny.
Yeah, and Middlestat had to be part of a return for Charlie Coyle, so they had to give up a lot.
Yeah.
So you can think about that. Colorado probably lost out on that trade, but if they win a cup with all the moves they made, it'll still be worth it. But that Byram for Middlestat swap is looking better for Buffalo by the day, and now Middlestat here in the Atlantic wearing the Bruins colors will be really weird to watch. Very there. Weird. But back to the Sabres here, Austin, and we'll continue on with the other minor move that kind of just trickled in. We were waiting for the Jokiharju thing, and then all of a sudden we got this Obey Kubel for Eric Brandstrom swap from the Rangers, and of course they finally make a move with the Rangers after all these years talking about these big time
Yeah.
moves between the two organizations. First with the Eichel trade, and then secondly, if they were gonna try to get in on Capo or Filipino or one of their other big guys that didn't end up moving, and they got JT Miller, but they move Ube Kubel. Obviously, was put on waivers, came up and down. Was really disappointing after we thought that he was going to be a solid fourth line winger, penalty killer for the Sabres. Hard guy to play against. Just really didn't do well at all. And they bring in Brandstrom as a depth defenseman. I guess they move out Yoki Haru, but I expect Brandstrom to probably be a Rochester guy. But I don't know if you have any quick thoughts on that trade.
Yeah, so like you said, it kind of just he's a part of that remade fourth line that just didn't quite work out, and then had been pretty serviceable in his 12 games for Rochester, right? 4 goals, but Rochester at the end of the day didn't really necessarily need Obey Kubel down there. I don't know what the Rangers plan to do with him. Rangers aren't out of it. Maybe he comes up as a serviceable, fourth line guy. I don't really know there, but Branstrom is good depth. For anyone, the 2018 World Juniors, him and Darlene were a really fun electric pair. So there's a little bit of connection there. But I imagine Adam's already said he's reporting to Rochester, so I'm kind of interested to see what happens there. Is a pending RFA, so I think he's definitely worth a potential, qualifying depth piece going forward to see if he could work out. But at the end of the day, he's a nice, silky, smooth offensive guy down there in Rochester who will probably help them out a lot.
25 years old. Forget that this guy was a first round pick in 2017 by the Vegas Golden Knights. I think that was he. I think they had a couple firsts that year. Obviously, just like every Vegas Golden Knight first rounder, didn't end up staying with the team. But I believe he got moved in one of their big trades with Ottawa. Maybe I think it was.
I think it was the Mark Stone deal.
It was the Mark Stone. Still, he was involved in a pretty significant trade at the time. As a first round pick, so maybe the Sabres can untap something that why scouts were so high on him. But again, it's mostly just going to be a depth move there. And Obey Kubel just again did okay at the AHL level, but they decided to move him there. And then I guess we'll go ahead and start talking about the big move of the day. We heard Kevin Adams coming into this talking about that he wants to make a hockey trade, or that he's been trying to make a hockey trade for 2 months now, even during the 13-game losing streak, and that he didn't just want to trade a guy just for prospects and futures and things like that they wanted to try to win now, or win next season, because they're basically out of the playoff push at this point. But they end up making that big trade with the Ottawa Senators, so an in-division trade here. They trade away Dylan Cousins, Dennis Gilbert, and a 2026 second-round pick, and they get back Jacob Bernard-Docker and Josh Norris. Austin, what was your initial reaction to seeing this trade?
So I think it was Kevin Weeks who kind of first reported the inklings of this trade, right? I believe he tweeted out like the Sabres and Sens are working on a trade involving Norris and Bernard Docker.
Yeah.
My first thought was, and again, this is full transparency, haven't watched a lot of Ottawa this year. Haven't watched a lot of NHL hockey this year before the Four Nations because the Sabres were just so depressing. So my original first thought was, all right, is Norris, still as good as I think he is? Looked it up. Yeah, he can still score. Yeah, was put it like this. Out of all the teams that we've talked about with Dylan Cousins and players we talked about with Dylan Cousins, I don't think Ottawa and Josh Norris were high on the average Sabres fans list. So it was definitely a shock. But I had been adamant that a core move needs to be made, and given the state of the team and the state of the player, Cousins made the most sense, right? Been struggling. You just watch him play lately. He just looks mentally broken, desperately. He's the definition of you watch a guy play, he just looks like he needs a change of scenery. Now, I don't know how Sens feel or felt about Norris. Like I said, I haven't really followed them much this year. I don't know if he was also in the category of needs a change of scenery. Didn't really hear his name out there much, except for over the last 24, 48 hours where I heard maybe potentially Ottawa was listening on him. So definitely caught off guard. How did you feel when you first saw like the inklings of this happening? I don't know. Like when I first saw the Weeks tweet, I think Cousins was. I know I saw some Sens fans say, "Oh my God, Paterka's a Sen." That's not where my brain went.
Yeah, we also heard the Paterka stuff last night that was swirling around about him possibly going to the Rangers, and we heard some other trades. Adams kind of confirmed that there was no validity to that, whether you want to believe him or not. He's got to look at all options. So maybe Ottawa was looking at Paterka, and then once they realized Buffalo wasn't interested, they kind of worked their way to Cousins there. But the way Buffalo had been playing, Austin, I mean, going in. It's just been depressing. I mean, you watched, the way they lost to Tampa, the way that they lost to a really bad, young and talented, but bad this year San Jose Sharks team on home ice. That was a really bad loss. You had that compounding with the Cousins incident last night where Darlene was kind of getting mugged at the end of that one play there by a couple of Lightning, and he kind of just stood around and looked like he was at mingling at a at a wedding or something like that, just kind of standing around. I don't know if that played into him getting moved today, but it definitely wasn't a good look last night for Dylan Cousins, and he ends up, being the main piece that Buffalo moves. And you heard Adams talk about it today that they needed just to shake up the core. They didn't want to go ahead and blow everything up, but they had to move one significant piece to try to see if that would work. And Ottawa coveted Cousins, so I mean, given what has gone on and given that Cousins has had the season that he's had, given that they both have years left on their contracts, I was kind of intrigued by the move at first. Again, we didn't have all the pieces together of Jacob Bernard-Docker and Dennis Gilbert, and the second-round pick is, it is what it is. The Sabres have so many assets, prospects and picks. If you're looking at it from just Cousins for Norris, I think that could possibly be an intriguing move there, given what Norris's skill set is, as long as he stays healthy. That's obviously been the big thing with him having 3 surgeries since 2019.
Yeah, right. So with Norris, kind of got into it back and forth a little bit with somebody earlier today, and they were just like, I hate this trade, blah, blah, blah. And I was just like, what's your concerns with Norris other than health? And they were just like, well, it's just the health. I'm like, that's fair. The health is a very valid concern with Josh Norris. But my counter argument to this, and like I will start this by saying Dylan Cousins is a good hockey player. It just was not clicking in Buffalo anymore, and it was time for a change. I think he'll still be very serviceable for the Ottawa Senators. So that's what I'm going to say there. TSN, I think I didn't watch Trade Center today. I was over in the States working, but they talking about Dylan Cousins like he's Tom Wilson and going to take all the fights away from Brady Tkachuk. Please just watch hockey. Guys on TSN, I know it's very hard with your job. You cover a lot of stuff, but that's not Dylan Cousins' game. It was at one point, hasn't really been that way for a year and a half. What Dylan Cousins is a hardworking player who has the ability and some upside to be a 55, 60-point player. So that being said, back to Norris's health concerns. Yeah, it's fair. But guess what? Dylan Cousins has been healthy, but he has not been good this year. Has not been good for the last year and a half. People can vary on their opinion here, but if Dylan Cousins was living up to his potential, I think it's not pretty obvious. The Sabres are at least in the playoff hunt right now. I think that's fair to say, right? So if your concerns are Norris can't stay on the ice, that's fair. He's on pace to play 74 games this year. Seems that's relatively healthy. So I get it. The health concerns are valid, but you have to take some risk here. Because the other risk was holding on to Cousins and hope he figures it out. And if you did that for much longer, you're not fetching a guy like Josh Norris in the return for him.
No, and again, like 50 games and 53 games, and then 8 games in 22-23. So again, he has had, a string here, but now with the 3 surgeries, and he's been on the shelf a little bit this season as well. Again, I know that they both have pretty significant term left on their contract. But from the way Brady Tkachuk was pretty emotional with the way that they got rid of Josh Norris. These are guys that have played together with the U.S. development program, World Juniors, and obviously together in Ottawa their entire careers. They've kind of built up together with Ottawa's core, just the same way that Cousins is kind of built up with the Sabres core. But as far as what they both have left on their contracts. They're both, Norris was on an 8-year deal, Cousins on a 7-year deal, but I believe they both have 6 years left on the contract for both of them. I'm trying to get that right now, but I believe that regardless of that, they both have significant years left on their contracts. Norris is a year older than Cousins, but I think what Norris brings, as long as he can stay on the ice, I think that this is going to bring a little bit of jump to the Sabres. I expect him to possibly be the guy in the first power play unit. Whether they want to keep Kulich with Thompson and Peterka because it has worked well, and kind of have him as the second line center, at least to start. I know Yuri Kulich was a paper transaction today. Correct me if I'm wrong. I believe Heather Engel tweeted that
Yeah.
there was a
Yep.
paper transaction. So to allow Yuri Kulich to play in the AHL playoffs with Rochester, if once the Sabres are eliminated, he can still go down there and help them during their playoff run. So as far as what Norris will bring and where he fits in the lineup, kind of got the forward lines up here now. It's basically just swapping Cousins with Norris right now for that part of it. And on the top power play unit right now, Alex Tuch, Josh Norris, JJ Peterka, Tage Thompson, Rasmus Dahlin, Austin. What intrigues you there?
I think what intrigues me on the power play there is just, again, nothing against Cousins at all. But Norris, I think Norris provides this, and it's hard here because I still think you had Jack Quinn on there, you had Yuri Kulich on there, so there has been shooting threats on the power play, but Norris is just another shooting threat who has had more success than those other guys have, right? He is been a productive power play player, so I think just throwing that out there is definitely a good thing. We'll get into this, I think, in the second half of the episode, but I am very interested what Lindy Ruff does with the lineup going forward the rest of the year. Based off what Kevin Adams said today, he expects Norris to be ready for tomorrow, so that's interesting. At least we can look forward to that. Bernard Docker's a different story. We'll get into him a bit, but I think Norris, at least for right now, like the Sabres power play is just in desperate need of anything to get it going, so I hope he's on the first power play, and I hope he gets every opportunity here for the rest of the season, because that's all this should be about, is kind of finding what works and what clicks. But his ability to shoot, his playmaking on the power play is a lot better than his 5-on-5 playmaking, which is a good thing. A little bit interesting there as well, because, Kulich, Quinn, Cousins, particularly Quinn and Kulich, aren't nearly as gifted as playmakers as I think Cousins was. Cousins was a little bit better, but if Norris can provide that as well, like I said, with Cousins, it's just, I'm not going to sit here and pretend this was a home run trade. I am in favor of this trade because it's the change that I think we asked for and we needed. But Cousins was just, you just weren't getting anything out of him. So if Norris gives you anything, that's a good thing for the Sabres this year, especially if he can give it to you on the power play and on the penalty kill, because he did play in all situations for Ottawa, and at least in this short interim, I expect him to play in all situations for Buffalo as well, because he's shown he's valuable in all situations. Got to give it a go and see if it works.
He's got 4 shorthanded points this year, and I believe 3 of them are goals. So he's a dangerous player. Even down a man. As far as the contracts go, Cousins is in year 2 of a 7-year contract worth 7.1. Norris is in year 3 of an 8-year deal worth 7.95. So again, Norris has a $800,000 more of a cap hit than Cousins, but again, in year 3 of an 8-year deal, Cousins in year 2 of a 7-year deal, and the 1-year age difference. So Adam said he was looking to move in money if he had to move out money, and I think Steve Stais was kind of the same way in Ottawa. So the contracts kind of line up really nicely, and just a change of scenery for both players. I think this is a trade that we could look back on, and regardless of how Gilbert and Bernard Docker and the second round pick work out, between Cousins and Norris, this could be a really nice trade for both sides to really kind of untap what the potential is for both these guys.
Yeah, 100%. Like I said, Dylan Cousins is not a guy that I think Sabres fans wish ill will towards and don't want to see him. It might be a little bit different now because he's on the Senators, and also, screw the Senators. So, I really hope they don't make the playoffs. But I would love it if Cousins could figure it out again. You know what I mean? He gave it his all when he was here, and he was a guy that really did want to be a part of this team going forward and wanted to be part of that group. He grew up with these guys, kind of like you said. It just, like I said, whatever happened, we all point to the Hathaway fight, because really he hasn't been the same since that happened. But it just, something hasn't clicked with him, and it got to the point this year where you could just tell, he didn't look like he knew what to do with the puck on his stick. It looked like he didn't want the puck on his stick. It looked like he didn't want to be near the hockey puck, which is not a good thing for someone who you expect to be your second line center. Change of scenery was desperately needed. And like I said, both players are relatively similar. there was people like, again, like, the Sabres are a dumpster fire. They deserve everything that they get, but it's so weird to see certain things from certain people who don't follow the team. Like, everyone was talking about, oh my God, the Sens got younger and cheaper. Guys, he's 18 months older than him, 15 months older than him, and it's $800,000 a year. It's not like they gave, like, so, I mean, technically they got younger and cheaper, sure, but we're not talking about a drastic change here. So it's just things like that where it's just like, God damn, you guys are going to make me root against Dylan Cousins because you guys are just being so dumb. Like, I saw people be like, the Buffalo Sabres should never be allowed to make a trade again because they gave up on Dylan Cousins. I don't know. Like, he wasn't working out here.
We wanted them to make a move, and they made a move.
Most of the people I saw say that were not Sabres fans, by the way. I just want to say that. It was just certain people. It's just like, there's a core move that happened. They got a player of similar value and similar role with term and a potential. We'll see what happens with Bernard Docker, but they got some potential with there as well. So I don't know. I think it's, like I said, a trade I think every Sabres fan can get behind because it's a core move. It's a guy who they expect to slot in as their second line center now. Similar age, similar cap hit. Although I think he is the Sabres' highest paid forward now, which I thought was a little bit funny.
Yeah, that is definitely interesting. Any quick thoughts on, obviously, Dennis Gilbert, a Buffalo native, 5 points in 25 games, is a part of the deal, and a second-round pick, which, again, we talk about the Sabres have accumulated enough prospects and draft picks over the years that giving up a second-round pick in this trade, for some security for Ottawa, I guess, with, Bernard Docker, if he does end up becoming anything as a former first-round pick himself. Any quick thoughts on kind of the rest of that trade?
From a Buffalo perspective, because I imagine we're gonna want to break down Bernard Docker here in a bit. Yeah, from a Sabres perspective, I try to tell people the second round pick, you can be annoyed with it, it's fine, but like, guys, it's a second round pick 2 years from now. The Sabres don't need any more second round picks. The Sabres don't need to be worried about holding on to draft picks anymore. It's not good for your mental health to freak out about that because there's so much more wrong with this team than giving up the second round pick in this trade. We saw how much they value second round picks. They gave up one for Beck Mallenstein. Right. Gilbert, I think he's a fine, serviceable seventh defenseman. I like some of the stuff that he brought to Buffalo, but it was also a kind of deal where once Gilbert's been in for more than 3 or 4 games in a row, it's not a good thing. Brings that physicality. People talk about it however you want. He did that fight off the jump, and you think of whatever you want of that, but he did provide that. I think he provides some nice defensive depth for Ottawa, who is on the middle of a playoff push here. Like I said, I don't know how much he's going to play for the Sens. He didn't play all that much for the Sabres here, so I imagine his role will be similar. It's again, if Dennis Gilbert's something that's got to be thrown into that deal to make it work, that's what you do.
Yeah, I mean, that's basically it. I mean, I wasn't too upset to see that Dennis Gilbert was a part of the deal. Probably had to move in a body, move out a body. Both teams got a forward, and both teams got a defenseman in the trade. So I think it was a solid trade from the Buffalo perspective of it. We're going to take a break. We're going to come back. We're going to get more of our fan reaction, talk about the rest of the day, and what the Sabres are going to do moving forward here. But stay right here. We'll be right back on Sabres Semantics, right here on the Armchair GM Sports Network, proudly brought to you by the Niagara Employment Help Centre, helping people find work since 1983. Back after this.
Are you currently looking for work in the Niagara region? If so, you owe it to yourself to check out the services provided by the Niagara Employment Help Centre, located at 6100 Thorold Stone Road in Niagara Falls. Their many free services include a fully staffed resource area open to the public, resume and cover letter writing, local labor market information, job search strategies, assistance with clarifying employment, training and career goals, employment counseling and job search support, and Better Jobs Ontario information and registration assistance. Check out their website at ehc.on.ca or call 905-358-0021 for more information. The Niagara Employment Help Centre, helping people find work since 1983.
This Employment Ontario program is funded by the Government of Ontario.
The great guys over at Hockey Stick Man are sponsoring this video. If you play hockey but are sick of paying upwards of $400 for top-end sticks, check these guys out. There's seriously no better place to shop. The guys are fun, easy, and offer a stress-free experience from start to finish. They get pro stock sticks from major junior junior teams right up to the NHL teams and sell them for half the price that the same stick would sell for at a retail store. To further support their mission of saving hockey families money, they offer closeout options, which entail taking last year's retail models and blowing them out for less than wholesale prices. It's literally the best prices on the internet for their sticks. And the best sticks of all may be their Pro Blackout series, which provide a top-end stick with no graphics and literally less than half the price of a branded top-end retail model. It's always been their best-selling stick despite super cool pro stock options. It's a no-brainer to shop with these guys, and trust me, they are beauties. Head over to hockeystickman.ca/thearmchairgm and get $15 off your first order. That's hockeystickman.ca/thearmchairgm to get an additional $15 off your first order when you sign up on their website. Check out our friends at Hockey Stick Man.
Fuel up your day with Gale's Gas Bars. They're your go-to gas stations in the Niagara region. Remember, at Gale's, they're not just a gas station. They're a local tradition. Whether you're hitting the road or staying cozy at home, choose Gale's. Gale's Gas Bars provide reliable fuel that keeps you moving. Stop in for quality you can trust and service with a smile. Don't settle for less. Head to Gale's Gas Bars today, because when it comes to fuel, you're going to Gale's! Learn more at gales.ca.
Wild Bill's Auto Repair is your local center for auto maintenance and repair in the Niagara region. Since 2012, Wild Bill's Auto Repair and Body Shop has been helping customers stay safe and confident on the road, knowing their vehicles in top running condition through their services. Located at 7868 Oakwood Drive in Niagara Falls, the garage started as a tribute to the owner's father, William Robert Hunter, who passed away, continuing the same community spirit and high level of service which customers came to expect from him back at Hunter's Auto Repair. Their multi-award winning auto shop has earned the trust of the Niagara community with its fair treatment of all customers, who can feel confident they'll get the trustworthy advice and repairs during their visit. Their experienced crew loves meeting new people and looks forward to forming a lasting partnership for the care of your cars. To find out more or to book a service, contact them today. 905-358-7868 or wildbillsauto.ca. Wild Bill's Auto Repair, helping customers stay safe and confident on the road since 2012.
Did you know that the global pet food stores in the Niagara region are all independently owned by members of the local community? We believe that pets are truly part of the family and are a source of joy in everyday homes around the world. Yet that living, loving experience usually doesn't happen all on its own, but takes extra effort to create and maintain. And we want you to know that the owners and staff at Global Pet Foods are always there to help you keep it going, any way we can, because we believe. Proud show sponsor of the Dog Pound podcast, the official podcast of the Niagara Ice Dogs. We hope to see you at one of the following locations across Niagara: 3643 Portage Road in Niagara Falls, 160 Highway 20 in Font Hill, as well as 400 Scott Street and 344 Glendale Avenue in St. Catharines. Global Pet Foods, where pets are undeniably part of the family.
You're listening to the Armchair GM Sports Network, the Niagara region's best local source for North American sports podcasting coverage. By sports fans, for sports fans.
Hey, hey, here we go, it's hockey night in Buffalo. Hey, hey, here we go, the boys in blue, white, and gold. Hey, hey, here we go, make some noise, get in the zone. All for one and one for all, let's hear you from your heart and soul. And we will stand raising our hands, saying, let's go Buffalo, let's go Buffalo. We will be here till the end, saying, let's go Buffalo, let's go Buffalo.
Welcome back to part 2 of today's Sabres Semantics Trade Deadline episode right here on the Armchair GM Sports Network, live on our YouTube channel. Make sure to hit like, hit subscribe, and smash that bell to stay up to date with all of our Sabres coverage and other coverage here on the network. And thank you to those that are listening the next morning or day on your favorite on-demand audio platform. Brandon Caputo and Austin Broder back with you, continuing to break down the Sabres movement at today's NHL Trade Deadline. Make sure to give us a follow on X at Sabres Semantics. Stay up to date with all of our Sabres coverage, as well as on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, by searching the Armchair GM Sports Network. Austin, so as we continue on here, going over the Sabres additions, subtractions, and re-signs from today's deadline. In the first part, we kind of went over most of the trades there and kind of reacting to that. Let's go to our next fan poll here, and we'll start there with, I guess you could say, How would you grade the Buffalo Sabres NHL trade deadline after moving out 5 assets, bringing in 4, and re-signing 2 players? A, B, C, or D were the options I provided. And B came away with 40% of the vote. C was at 36.7, and D was at 23.3. How would you sort of rate what we saw from the Sabres today?
Yeah, for anyone who voted D, I'm a little bit curious. I don't know what else would have made that better.
Coming from somebody who's been very critical of Kevin Adams as yourself.
Yeah. Like, yeah. I mean, again, I'm not trying to give the guy too much credit, but like he did trade a core player today. Aside from the Rantanen trade, he probably had the biggest trade of the day.
Yeah.
I guess Marchand, but like in terms of like long-term impact, I think you could say that Norris for Cousins was the second biggest trade of the day. I'd probably go with a B minus, right? Like, you got Zucker and Greenway re-signed. You flipped Yoki Haru for a 4th. You got a depth defensive for Rochester, but you were able to swing a hockey trade again for the 3rd year in a row. I won't call the Greenway trade a hockey trade because it just involved draft picks, but like you were able to get a player with team control for multiple years for the 3rd trade deadline in a row. So like, yeah, B minus, right? Like now, how would I grade Kevin Adams' job in season? That's a lot different if you want to go to D for that. Yeah. But in terms of what you expected today, I don't know what more was expected from Sabres fans today, but I came away relatively, again, not over the moon, like, oh my God, this is a franchise-defining trade here. But guess what? Usually the good trades, the hockey trades, you don't necessarily know who won. And based off the Senators and Sabres trade, that's kind of what you got, right? Each player, you traded a 25-year-old potential second-line center for a 24-year-old potential second-line center. But he was a core guy that Adams committed to. So he does deserve credit for moving on from a guy like that and getting someone with the same amount of term in a similar role.
Our other fan poll was thoughts on the trade that we're talking about, the big trade with Ottawa today. My options I gave were great move, involved good pieces, bad move, should have kept Cousins, could be better / worse, or good if Norris stays healthy. And obviously good if Norris stays healthy won at 54.9%. Could be better, worse was 21%. Bad move, keep Cousins, that was 17.6%. And great move was only at 5.9%. So again, I think that might have been, I put that poll out the second that trade happened, so that could have been people's instant reaction to thinking that, maybe it could have been better, but then once they kind of had some time to process it over the last couple hours, maybe their opinion changed on it. But I'd say that's pretty positive and pretty accurate. We've been talking about the whole time that we've talked about this trade already today that, Norris's health is obviously a number one concern and going to be, pretty much the X factor in this trade because, he has missed significant time over his career. He's missed 58. He's only played 58 of a possible 164 games in the last 3 seasons. So, again, that's obviously there, but the skill is obviously there as well. And if he's able to put that injury history behind him, because we've seen players in the league that, got off to some early injury trouble and it doesn't plague them their entire career. And hopefully, for the Sabres perspective, a lot of hypotheticals, but if he's able to stay healthy, he's a very serviceable player and a guy that can make a big impact with this club. And I think, obviously, with Bernard Docker, a guy that was another late first round pick that hadn't really panned out with the Senators. Maybe he becomes, a bottom 4 defenseman. Obviously, that's probably where he's going to play, if not a bottom pair defenseman. Do you have any more thoughts on just the way that trade might work out, other than just the Cousins and Norris portion of it?
Yeah, so the Bernard Docker piece is intriguing to me for a variety of reasons, right? So,
right.
24 years old, former first-round pick. Now, it's funny. From the 2018 draft, the Sabres now have 3 defensemen that were taken in the top 33 picks. Dahlin, obviously, first overall. Bernard Docker, 26th overall. And Mattias Samuelsson, 32nd overall.
Right.
So, depending on what Bernard Docker's role ends up becoming here, that could be three defensemen from that draft taken in the first 32 picks. So I thought that was interesting. What's intriguing to me about Bernard Docker is I think you're going to see him Now, I'm not saying this is the long-term fit, but I think the rest of this year you're going to see him get some run with Owen Power. At least that's kind of what I'm hoping for, because I don't know if you were able to hear Kevin Adams today. Did you get to listen to his press conference?
I listened to about 10 minutes of it.
Okay, so there was an interesting tidbit about Bowen Byram, which I think we can definitely touch back on when we talk about the future of this team. But he essentially said Bowen Byram has been a really good player for us when playing with Rasmus Dahlin. What has happened the last couple of games, Bowen Byram hasn't been with Rasmus Dahlin. So that comment perked my ears a little bit, because that means Byram, I would hope, goes back to playing with Dahlin, because that's where he's been effective, which would then open up a spot in the top four. And the reason that I'm thinking Bernard Docker gets some run here is he's the right shot, natural fit. Now that means Samuelson would have to go down to the third pair, but I think that's fine. I think that's where he should be. I've been steadfast with that.
No Yoki Haru as well.
Exactly. So I'm thinking for the rest of this year, you get a top six of Byram, Dahlin, Power, Bernard Docker when he's ready to go, Clifton, Samuelson. Okay.
Bryson is the extra.
Bryson is the extra. I think I would like to see that, because two things. One, Bernard Docker isn't an offensive first guy, which is kind of what we're thinking Power needs. So the season's lost. Why not give him some run here? That could set you up. I also did think, again, another thing from Kevin Adams was unprompted. He mentioned something he could do better was identifying a specific partner who could play with Owen Power. So like, these are just kind of all things that are going into my brain right now, which that makes Bernard Docker a lot more interesting, because if we can get 20-ish games of him playing with Owen Power, that's something it's another storyline to watch with the Sabres, which is something we all need to stay invested for the rest of this year. So I think Bernard Docker's long-term fit here is third pair defenseman. He probably replaces Connor Clifton if he works out. But he's a guy that has RFA status again as well. He's in this trade for a reason. I don't think he's quite the throw-in that Dennis Gilbert was. Hey, what the hell? Why not give him a shot? He's got the pedigree. He's got the handedness that you need, this potential playing style that you need. I think that's a storyline to watch here. So that makes that trade a little bit more interesting in my eyes, because, hey, if that works out and Bernard Docker becomes a player, that's big. And if he doesn't, well, Josh Norris is the big piece of this trade anyway.
I mean, Dennis Gilbert.
There's upside there.
You basically swap out Gilbert for, Bernard Docker. I mean, I'm okay with that. I mean, even if you put him where Yoki Haru was as well, as the guy that was in that lineup. So you move out two of your, I'd say, would you call them 6th and 7th of their 8th D, basically? I would say Gilbert and Yoki Haru were probably number 6 and 7 on their depth chart.
Gilbert for sure, yeah. Yoki Haru, he was a weird one, because he was in your top 4 and then he was out of the lineup. So, like I said, what worst case scenario? Bernard Docker's your 6th, 7th defenseman. Well, yeah. That's worst case scenario. He's got a right shot. Best case scenario, he can stick with Power for a little bit. So it's something to watch. I don't know how it's going to work out. I'm not saying this is something we should all be expecting, but it's something to watch to see if there's something there.
And something to add to that, they move out 2 defensemen. They only bring in 1, and we know the Sabres like to have 8D on the roster. So does that mean Ryan Johnson's coming back up from Rochester?
Yeah, that's a good point. My dad asked me that today, and I was like, I don't know what that... Again, he's a guy... He hasn't played good enough when he's been up here, but also he's a guy that maybe should get some run here. If not him, somebody else, but they don't really have many... They don't have right shot D down in Rochester, so...
Yeah, I mean, that would be probably the obvious choice there, but, maybe Brandstrom gets a look at some point if they need a guy to come in the lineup. I don't know. Like they acquired him as a D-man, but mostly as a Rochester body there. But I'd probably guess that it would either be Brandstrom or Johnson that get the call up if they need that 8th D up on the roster.
Yeah, 100%. Like I said, it was just so those two comments by Adams really stuck out to me, because the finding a partner for Power thing was kind of something he was talking about what he thinks he can improve on as a GM. And then the Byram one was interesting because, again, he's got the pending RFA status. So for him to kind of just throw it out there that, I mean, we as Sabres fans all know it, that he really has only had success with Dahlin, which is fine. Like, good. It's good that he's having success with Dahlin because at times they look dominant. But it was kind of just interesting, not unprompted, but it was kind of just interesting when asked about Bowen Byram's future. One of the real positives that Adams had to say was, yeah, he plays good with Dahlin.
Any other thoughts that you thought were of note that we should mention from the Adams presser?
Again, as someone who really doesn't like Kevin Adams, I thought today's presser was actually pretty good.
I thought he was more transparent than maybe he was in the last one. Honest.
I thought he was, I thought he was a lot more transparent. You know, he did do his usual Pagula bootlicking, but like that's what you do. But for the most part, like I thought he was pretty transparent and like, yeah, like it's good to. Again, if he went out there and tried to say like he did everything that he could and it just didn't work, that would have been bad. So like giving him credit for saying like I'm glad he knows he hasn't been good enough is I'm not going to give him praise for that, but it's okay. There's some semblance of like, yeah, I get it. This has been a complete disaster. But I thought he wore it pretty well. The other interesting thing that I thought, and this is just really semantics, he was just like, man, for anyone to think that I don't I forget the context of it, but he was basically just like, I love this city. I want this to work. And for anyone to think that I don't love Buffalo or whatever, it hurts. And I was just like, guy, our problem isn't that we don't think that you love Buffalo. Our problem is you just haven't been good at your job. But he self-admitted that he hadn't been good at his job. Now, self-admitting it and doing something about it are two completely different things. I still don't have faith that he will go out there and do a lot. But I also didn't have faith he was going to trade Dylan Cousins before the trade deadline today. So, yeah. I mean, for anyone who thought he was getting fired this year, I had always been saying, like, he's not. Like, he's just not. Pagula likes that he has Kevin Adams here. I think if rumors are true, he's only got 1 year left on his contract. So, like, I always thought he was here next year. So, for him to say he needs to be better is one thing. But, hey, now maybe there's some pressure on him to actually go out and do this because he doesn't have a whole long-term contract.
And I think he did say something in there about just he wants to do a better job of assessing the needs of the team or something like that. Like something he said along those lines of making sure he tried to find somebody, a better partner for Owen Power. I think he used that as an example.
Yep.
You know, trying to do a better job of assessing what it was that the team needs to they not go through a 13-game losing streak. And take themselves out of any sort of playoff conversation here after the trade deadline. So, like you said, there was some self-admittance there from him, not just trying to be arrogant and saying he's doing a great job. I think he realizes that the team wouldn't be where it is right now if he would have went out and got that top six forward that he was, you know, just stubborn of doing. And then obviously things didn't work out with Cousins. Jack Quinn's taking a step back this year. Obviously Tage has been injured a little bit. And then Zucker was kind of a godsend there, and they're able to get him re-signed. But going forward here, we got about 10 minutes left here. You know, kind of what are your thoughts here as we go forward for the rest of the season? And do you think that, you know, maybe at least Adams got some conversation started on some other players on this roster that maybe need to get dealt that might happen at the draft or free agency or, you know, after July 1st?
Yeah. One more thing from the press conference. Never thought I'd say this on the pod. Shout out Mike Harrington. He asked a really good question about the 13-game losing streak, basically saying, like, why did you do nothing? Why didn't you call up somebody? Yeah, that was a great – I thought that was fantastic. Adam's answer was, you know, it takes two to tango, blah, 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 same old shtick there. But thought that was a fantastic question by Mike Harrington, so he deserves credit for asking that because that's what we were all wondering is what the hell were you doing? So credit to that. In terms of going forward, other trade players, things like that. To me, that was why the Byram conversation was interesting. Someone with RFA status who has kind of already made it known he'd like to be a number one defenseman. So for Adams to kind of just say, hey, like you're only good with Dahlin, not necessarily great in terms of potential trade value there, but he's a player I'm looking at. Could he help you acquire a forward? Yeah, I think he could. And if Dahlin is as good as we think he is, which he has shown that he is, he can carry anybody. So I thought, you know, the Byram thing and the looking for a partner for Power were two very interesting things. Don't want to get too much into it, but the Peterka thing I thought was interesting. I'm glad he kind of put that to bed. If there is any doubt with Peterka's future here, I think clearly not to be whatever. That's not from the Sabres side, right? Like, why would the Sabres not want Peterka here part of their long-term future? So I'm really interested about his contract status because I do think Kevin Adams isn't really going to be giving out long-term deals. Maybe McLeod would be the closest one out of the key RFAs because he is a little bit older and his role wouldn't really command the large contract that a top 6 forward would. So McLeod might be the only one. But the Peterka one's interesting. Do you just bridge him for 2-3 years and then try to like players like Peterka, who's RFAs, like he's here no matter what. And if he gets offer sheeted, like unless it's like the maximum term and maximum dollar amount, I don't think there's any hesitancy on Buffalo to match that because that's how good he's been. But like the guys like Peterka, the guys like Tuck is an interesting one too. Peterka and Tuck are the two guys I'm going to mention here just because of their contract status. Those are two guys you need to show you're serious about turning this around because one, Tuck is a UFA in a year and a half from now. If you want him here, you need to show him you're serious because there's no reason for him to sign here right now unless you show him you're going to turn this around. Peterka is another interesting one. He's a homegrown player that Adams traded up for. You want him here long term. You got to start playing good because these guys are not going to continue to sign here for long term because why would they when this feels like it's a dead end? So I definitely do think there was some conversations on other players that Adams might be interested in moving. But I think what's next is get your RFAs done, outline a plan to actually improve this team to make it a real playoff contender, right? Because the forwards aren't really the problem. Now that if Norris plays the way that we think he can, forwards aren't really the problem. They score a lot at 5-on-5. Their power play, special teams, defense is the problem. So find Owen Power, that partner. He mentioned that specifically unprompted today, so that gives me a little bit of hope. And then find a way to get that one more forward. Doesn't necessarily have to be anything crazy, but if Bowen Byram can get you another guy where maybe potentially you're talking about Yuri Kulich, doesn't have to be your number one center next year because I'm interested to see what happens with Tage as well. I hope he goes back to center because I think that's where he's at his best. But it's just get that one more forward piece, find a real partner for Owen Power, actually defend and have decent special teams. And this team is not. I'm not going to say they're not far off because they're clearly far off. But their offense is good enough. It's the other areas here. So it just actually lay out a blueprint and actually do it. Like, I don't want to be sitting here in September and Adams being like, well, I had some trades in place, but they didn't fall apart. If that happens again, we're in trouble. Identify these moves and make them happen. You just showed you could do it. You did it today. I don't know how long the Cousins-Norris deal is actually in progress, but like you showed you could do it. There are good players without trade protection. You identified a good one in Norris today. So you can do it. Just do it in the areas that it actually needs to be done. And hey, maybe this thing won't get to 15 years.
Any quick thoughts on the goaltending?
Just too inconsistent, right? Now, if the defense improves, does UPL improve? Maybe. But like the couple of the Tampa goals were weird. Give them that. Like
a couple of the San Jose games
especially.
were bad, or goals were bad too.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. The Tampa goals to me were weird in terms of Clifton put it in your own net, one tipped off of Byram. But that Eklund goal in the San Jose game, after you come back to make it 3-2.
Scores from the corner.
You just can't. You cannot, as a starting goalie, give that up. I've been on him all year. I think he has the upside there. But you find that consistency. You get a little bit better defensively. And for God's sakes, figure out your power play. If I don't know the Seth Appert thing, what we can talk about later. I don't think he's clearly not going anywhere. But God damn, man, like we're back to. I was gonna say we're back to 2 years ago, but 2 years ago the power play was good.
Maybe Josh Norris.
Maybe we're back to the problems of 2 years ago and last year. 2 years ago was the goaltending. Last year was the special teams. What is it this year? Well, special teams and goaltending.
You think Levi has anything to do with this going forward?
Next year?
Yeah.
I don't think next year.
You think they forced him in a little too quickly, and now you just want to have Reimer as that veteran guy to kind of help Luukkonen through this kind of wave right now?
Yeah, go find another veteran goalie next year. You know me at the start of the year. I was like Levi and Luukkonen. Clearly, that cannot coexist because both goalies need to play. So for me, your plan should be next year: get a veteran backup. Tell Levi you're going to dominate the AHL again because Dustin Wolf did it for a long time in Calgary. And now look at him now. He's playing really well. So for me, it's Go into the season with Levi as your cemented number one in the AHL. Have Luukkonen a veteran backup. And then if something happens, Luukkonen gets hurt per se, you got to call Levi up there. But Levi is clearly a goaltender that needs to play and play a lot because look at him in the AHL.
Yeah, so we're going to have a lot more to talk about down the stretch here. Hopefully, the next month or so of Sabres hockey isn't something that we have to dread on coming on to talk about. Again, Kevin Adams made some intriguing moves today, and look forward to seeing kind of where Josh Norris kind of fits in here. Look forward to seeing possibly Bernard Docker where he fits on the D-core. And, Jason Zucker and Jordan Greenway now playing with contracts and knowing where they're going to be the next couple seasons. So 3 moves by the Sabres today, a couple of re-signs as well. And that's basically it for their trade deadline, bringing in Josh Norris, Jacob Bernard Docker, 4th-round pick, and Eric Brandstrom, moving out Dylan Cousins, Dennis Gilbert, Henry Jokiharju, and a 2nd-round pick, and then re-signing Zucker and Jordan Greenway. So thank you to everybody that's tuned in live tonight on our YouTube channel. Make sure to hit like, hit subscribe, and smash that bell if you want to stay up to date with all of our live coverage. Thank you, that this went really well here, reacting to trade deadline day itself, and thank you to those that are listening the next day in your favorite on-demand audio platform. So for Austin Broad, my name is Brandon Caputo. That's going to be it for our Sabres Semantics special trade deadline recap, brought to you by the Niagara Employment Help Centre, helping people find work in Niagara since 1983. We'll be back with you guys in a week or so, hopefully discussing some positive results for the Buffalo Sabres here moving forward. So for Austin Broad, my name is Brandon Caputo. Have yourself a great night, and that's going to do it right here on Sabres Semantics.